Call to order the Budget and Personnel Committee meeting, March 9th, 2021, 5 p.m. And at this time, I will open it up for public comment, which I don't believe we have any, I'm pretty sure.
No public, Mr.
comment.
Chairman.
So we've got the agenda before us, so I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So then we move into considering changes to the personnel manual, and I'm going to turn this over to Mike Talbert, and you can lead us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These changes, there are a few changes. They is not anything different than the way we operate now. We're just getting the book to catch up with the way we operate a little bit. The changes, if you will notice in your agenda, are in red. The first one, they all have to do with the leave section. The first one is that it adds a statement saying that under no circumstances will an employee be paid for an accrued leave exceeding 280 hours. That is the way we in fact operate, but the employee manual did not mention that anywhere. What brought that to my attention, we had as you know, two employees retire earlier in the year. And while you're allowed to carry over 280 hours at the end of the calendar year, for the next year, you can still accrue leave after that. So if we have an employee who is retiring in September, let's say, and they carried over 280 hours in January, they will accrue leave from January to September. This statement just makes it clear that we will pay you for the 280 hours that you're allowed to carry over, not the additional accrued leave that you would pick up that year. That's the extent of that change. Moving on down. The next one, jury duty was always allowed, and it was allowed. You could take jury duty without taking leave, and you were still paid for it. We just formalized it a little bit. Employees required to serve as jurors either locally or in federal court will not be charged annual leave for their absence. However, any compensation received from the court for their service must be remitted to the town upon receipt. That's a pretty standard clause that a lot of government agencies do. You can't take leave and take a check from the court at the same time. And then employees that serve partial days, and I'll bring out myself on this, usually once a year I have grand jury duty. It doesn't usually last all day, and I usually go back to work afterwards. But employees that serve partial days will be charged annual leave for the remaining hours away from work after their jury duties are satisfied. Verification of the actual days and time served will be by the appropriate clerk of the court. Again, that's the way we're operating now. This just clarifies it. And the third change has to do with the sick bank. Employees may use a maximum of 30 work days or 240 hours from the sick leave bank on an annual basis. Again, pretty standard. That's the way we're operating now. It just wasn't clear in the employee's handbook that that's the way we were operating. So these changes are merely to clarify some points.
And on that jury deal, do you need to put, you've got verification of actual days, do you need to put and time, or just because you don't have time mentioned in that?
Sure, we can absolutely do that.
And why do you have 240 from the employee bank, but they can accrue
Well, if you take,
280?
like, Mr. Rush's employees don't work an 8-hour day, and they might work a 24-hour shift.
Oh, okay, I got you.
So if they're one day, they may do 24 hours a day. So.
I got you. That's all good.
And yes,
I see
so.
what you're saying. All right, unless y'all have any questions, I'll entertain a motion on those.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Number 5, consider chamber budget request. So we have, request is in your agenda packet to the town requesting help for fiscal year 21, in our fiscal year 21-22 budget. So we need to get a view on the committee, or an idea of what the committee desires on this. determining to go forward or not. And then we can, if we're favorable, we can maybe give it back to staff and they can crunch out the numbers a little bit, or vice versa. So.
I've read over this. Reading their letter, I don't feel comfortable with this. We gave them 25 grand last year in addition to the meals tax that they get, which was 47, 165, if I'm looking at that right. And the 1% that was just passed that went into effect January 2021, that was earmarked for public safety. We discussed that pretty heavily, that it would go for Brian and Robbie's their needs. I'm not comfortable with it. It's not, I feel like that in the last 7 years, $314,929, they're getting the meals tax, the Civic Center is getting meals and tip, transient occupancy. And I've been thinking about this since Mike brought this to us. I'm a huge fan of the Chamber. I think they do an outstanding job. I've said that to Evelyn, I've said it to Joanne, I've said it to many, many people, but how about if these other places start coming to us and saying, well, you gave the Chamber, all of this. I can't get behind it. I got, as Miss Ellen used to say, I've got heartburn about it.
Well, the Chamber is our tourism board. And I realize this year was something special because they didn't have any other fundraisers or normal things that they do. No seafood festival, no decoy festival, no oyster festival, no nothing. So I wouldn't be adverse to giving them a little bit extra to help them along, but I don't know about long term.
They're the tourism board but they're not a government entity.
No,
They're not, and that's where I have a problem with that. They're already getting X amount of dollars from us. And I want them to succeed. Please don't anybody misconstrue that I don't want them to succeed. I just don't feel comfortable handing out more of the meals tax than what was already set aside and what is already set aside and what has been decided on, several years ago. I'd like to figure out a way to help them to succeed, but I can't get behind this one.
Well, the 1% of the 1% TOT increase, that was not entirely earmarked for public safety and fire. That was earmarked for hiring an additional EMT at the time or something. That was I think the focus of that, wasn't it?
I don't think
When
so.
they talked about
If
that.
I remember correctly, it was part of my budget also. And it was discussed, Brian needed EMTs, I needed officers. Part of it was that the recent increase in the tourism that we've had
Right.
caused more calls for them, more calls for us.
Right.
And when it was discussed, and I think when Mr. West put it over, is where he told me that he was putting it over, that was where my extra officer was gonna come from and his extra EMTs that he had asked for. That was where they were coming from. That was that 1%. Because we even had it worked out in the budget that I was not gonna be able to hire or promote a major until after January 1st, after that had already taken effect.
Right.
So that was, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my understanding.
I think you're spot on. That's the way I recalled it too.
I think that's
It
how
was
we
a
sold it.
total of both of our departments, combined.
Last year's budget, and by last year's, I mean the budget that we're currently in, prior to COVID, had, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, 3 full-time EMTs added to staff, or paramedics added to staff, and it had promotions in it for members of the police department, and 1 promotion was delayed until January in order to make the budget work. Am I right about that, Rob?
You're getting the SRO.
And SRO,
The
I'm sorry.
SRO was gonna be hired in July to have them ready for the school year, that past school year. But then I had to wait on the promotion, or.
One of the
major
promotions,
position
yeah.
Until January.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was my share, or our department, the police department share out of it was those, you
And,
know, the
and as,
promotions and the 1 extra person for the SRO.
as I remember when I started working on the budget back in May when I came here, and that was post-COVID, that's what I found was originally planned for 2021.
Right, because you're increasing, your 1% increase, what, 245?
It was a 25% increase in the overall tax, which is a little over $200,000, yes.
Yeah, it was a 240, so we didn't run that in the earmark, all that.
Or I should say 25% addition, increase in collections to that tax.
Right, that's 245.
How much is in our, I'm looking for it in here, how much is in our,
This year, your transit occupancy was budgeted at $1,290,000.
no, how much is in our,
Meals?
the money that we gave them 25 grand last year, and that came out of,
Parks and Rec, that came out of your long-term growth and savings.
Right.
LGIP.
You talking about the chamber?
Yeah.
We gave them 25 grand, came out of the recreation and tourism account,
Now,
which
what
there
did you
was
find out?
close
Did
to $1
we have
million.
any, do we have any earmark on the TOT for going back to promotion of tourism? Did you, were you able to solidify that to an extent?
No.
Okay.
We have, transit occupancy, it was dedicated at, it doesn't, well, let me back up. Transit occupancy, there was no set percentage on. It was as appropriated, from what I've read, as appropriated by the council on a yearly basis.
Okay. So there's no fixed amount.
There was no fixed amount. Now, that amount that's been appropriated has been, for the last several years, $110,000. It has been capped at 110. Well, let me put it hasn't been capped. It's been budgeted at $110,000.
Right.
And instead of cutting a check for a percentage of transient occupancy to the center each month, we simply take the $110,000 and give them 1/12 of that each month, and then they get 5% of the meals tax, as does the chamber.
and right now, the way I'm looking at this right now, the Civic Center, which has been pretty much closed, right?
Mm-hmm.
We should have held back on their 1/12 and probably gave that to the chamber.
Well, Mr. West did, as COVID started, he called them and told them that they were in effect cut off for the next several months, but we picked it back up when we picked up the meals tax back to the chamber. We picked up giving back to the Civic Center again at the same time.
Because they still had some expenses and,
Mhm.
you know, keeping power on, keeping that kind of stuff.
But as I remember, I think there were 3 months when they issued very little money to either organization.
Yeah, it was.
So it's a pleasure, you know, do we want to send it back to Mike to work on the numbers? Do we want to let it die here? You know, I'm biased because
Yeah.
your money's coming, the only increase we've got coming in revenues is through tourism right now. So, you know, if you don't foster that, that's your only potential for growth.
I have no issues giving them a one-time shot like we did before. I cannot get behind digging into that extra 1% that was set aside for their departments. And that's the way I feel that we discussed it. And Mike, if you wouldn't mind going back and looking at that.
Well, that's how we sold it.
Yeah.
That's how we passed it along, that,
But I can't get behind increasing, increasing what they're getting now, if that makes sense.
Well,
I feel like, I feel like that, I know they're not doing the seafood festival. I have no idea what Governor Northam said today. I know there was a press conference. Maybe you can enlighten us on that. But I feel like by October, hopefully, we might be able to get the Oyster Festival in and things are going to be looking back up. That's why I've got no issues with the one-time shot, but I can't get behind increasing how they're getting it now.
well, if you look at the little distributions box that Mike did,
Mhm.
The chamber was, or not the chamber, Civic Center was steady at the 110
Mm-hmm.
for years. And then we've cut them back, for one reason or another. So that's close to.
Well, the FY20 numbers reflect the 3 months where I told you we didn't
yeah,
give
we
them anything.
didn't do it.
Yes.
But we've also tightened their budget a little bit because of activity that was going on over there. So if we can, I hate to rob Peter to pay Paul, but if we can look at that number that we pay the Civic Center, that we have paid historically for them, and what we're not paying them now because of other issues, maybe it should go to the chamber. That way the chamber will be boosted a little bit. And the town's not out any money because we would have been spending that already going to the Civic Center. Just, to me, it seems like we need to investigate it a little bit more and see what kind of money is available to them.
Yeah, because we don't want to have to start a tourism department within the town. The whole goal is to keep this off the town books,
Yeah.
to the best of our ability.
I've been saying for a long time, and Arthur, you've heard me say it, the center, and nobody can help COVID. COVID happened, it's here, we're dealing with it. But the center, we're shoving money over there to a building that has not been open because of COVID. And yeah, they've had some expenses as far as keeping the lights on and stuff like that. I feel like that probably that the town should just pick up the electric bill and keep this money until it's time to get back open for them. We've taken over maintenance. Is that correct,
Yes,
Mike?
ma'am. That is to say, we've taken over regular maintenance. We're not making any expenditures into
Right.
capital improvements or anything.
I'm going to assume that the director over there is she getting unemployment? Is she laid off? Is she getting paid?
That I couldn't tell you.
I think she's getting paid, but at a reduced, work week.
Yeah, that I think that there's room to play with what's going on. I think there's room to play with their budget a little bit better than it is to play with the other.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I'm not willing to take away from public safety. That's, because that's one thing that's gonna continually go up. That doesn't come down.
You want to send it back to staff then, let Mike work on some numbers and come back to us?
Yeah,
And then we can, at least then we can decide if we want to
yeah.
move it on or.
See what kind of numbers, because I definitely want to help the chamber, but I don't want to help the chamber at the detriment of other things that need it worse.
Nope.
You agree with that, and you send
Yes,
it
I
back?
do.
All right, we'll send it back to you, Mike, and you can work on some numbers and.
So you'll be looking for a staff recommendation for how much money to reduce basically to reduce the Civic Center's budget in favor of increasing the chamber's contribution to the chamber.
Right, and well,
Would that be on an annual basis or a one-time deal?
I
One
don't,
time,
I think, yeah, one time, I don't think that,
one time now.
yeah.
And see
Because
what
I
happens.
foresee that the Civic Center is not gonna be operational, fully operational like they were until this mess is over with altogether, whereas the chamber is operating continuously on a continuous basis.
All right, well, then we'll send that back to staff, and you can look at it at all different angles, Mike, and if you just have a little magic pot of money that comes up, maybe you look at that.
Yeah.
Magic pot.
That's what we do.
St. Patrick's Day is coming.
It's coming.
That's right.
That's what we do, look for that magic pot.
All right, review of fiscal year 22 proposed budget. Turn that over to you, Mike.
Okay, I gave everybody some paper spreadsheets. I've also put in in the last few minutes here, put in your email accounts, the actual Excel spreadsheet. If you have the Excel program, you can manipulate that and have a ball. I also put it on the board here so it's easy for everybody to see. And I'm going to start with the wrong file, I'm sorry. I'm going to start with the ending first, and that is going to the last page of those spreadsheets. You will see a page that looks like this. This is a summary page. What it does is it tells us by division or by department where we are with expenditures and revenues this year or this year coming as proposed to the year that we are in. And at the end there it gives you an overall summation of where we stand. We've already hit each department independently, and I will say this, today when you look back at the individual spreadsheets, which we'll do in just a second, I spent a few hours this morning updating the actual lines, and there's a column in there that gives you the actual expenditure to date for each one of those budget items, showing you exactly how much we've spent for that item through March 9th of this year. And that hopefully will give you it gave me some insight as to how we're trending on a lot of these revenues. And as such, this morning I also spent some time increasing my projected revenues in certain areas, which helped out considerably. Before this morning, the total budget was about $310,000 out of whack after playing with the revenues a little bit and making some more informed judgments or predictions of what the revenues will be. We're now about $253,000 out of whack or out of balance. I will say, though, that the single most concerning part to this is that the budget has always been balanced by department. The general fund balances revenues and expenditures, as does harbor, trolley, water. They all balance within the department, as it should be. If you look at the general fund right now, we are $385,000 out of balance, and that's expenditures over revenues. The biggest part of that is because I did reduce the projected revenues for meals tax for next year by $200,000. I thought that was a prudent thing to do at the time. I have not yet changed it. And because we're talking about that, we'll go ahead and go back and look at the revenues. The revenue sheet is the first page you have there. Okay, and I'll blow it up on the screen so everybody can see it a little better. There we go.
How much were we under this year on meals?
Well,
Wasn't much, was it?
that brings up a very good, and I'm going to share that with you. I might as well do it now. Every month in the council meeting, I give you meals and transit occupancy as of the 20th of the previous month. The reason I picked the 20th is that's the date that those two taxes are due to the town office. So I give you what was posted on the 21st, the next morning, thinking that the majority of all these taxes are in. Generally, the transient occupancy has been meeting or exceeding last year's numbers, and meals has been slightly behind. The thing that I have found over the last few months is that if you wait till the end of the month, meals catches up and makes budget, or close to budget. So we're actually, from the view that you've had from council meetings, we're actually a little better off. And saying that, right now, I'll take you to,
I'm just gonna go out on a limb and I'm gonna try to be, looking at the cup as half full, but I'm really hoping that the worst is behind us.
well, if you look at the board now, and you don't have this page, if you look at the board, those are the meals taxes for the last, since 2016. 2021, the year we're in, is all the way to the right. Okay, the numbers in black are the monies we've already collected in the months we've completed. The number at the very bottom of that chart, $812,033, is what we've actually collected to date as of the last day of February. Not the 20th of February, which you've been seeing in the council meetings, but the last day of the month.
I can't hardly see it. Is it 812, you say?
Let me blow her up for you a little bit
033.
more. There you go.
Okay.
812,033. That's what we've collected in meals to date as of the 28th of February. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The numbers below, all the way to the right and below February in red, are my projections for meals taxes for March, April, May, June, the rest of the fiscal year. And that number in red at the bottom, 1,038,000, is my projection for what we will collect in meals taxes for FY21. It was budgeted at $1.1 million. So as you can see, we're going to be pretty close. That's my projections. And if you'll look, they're slightly lower. They're about 10% lower than what we collected last year for each month on a monthly basis. And I discounted the months of April, May, and June because we were already in COVID, and I went back to 2019 and used those numbers because I think they're more representative of what we're going to see this fall, or this spring, I'm sorry. So my projection is we're going to be just under budget at $1,038,000. We were budgeted at 1.1, and that's for meals. Moving down to transient occupancy. Again, same scheme. If you go all the way to the right, 2021, the numbers in black are by the end of February, and the budget all the way at the number all the way at the bottom in red, or I should say in black, $1,175,000 is what we've collected to date for transient occupancy. Our budget for transient occupancy this year is $1,290,000. So as you can see, we're not far away from that number now. If you look at the numbers in red for the last 4 months, or the last 4 months of the year, totaled by the last number in red, you'll see that my projection for transient occupancy is $1,442,000, which exceeds our budget by over $100,000.
Can't get over how much higher August is than July.
August is July's numbers, right?
Yes, August is
okay.
July's
All
numbers.
right, all right.
What you collect in August is for July's
Okay,
activity.
gotcha,
So.
all right.
But so I'm thinking on these two taxes, when you combine them, we're going to make our budget.
You're gonna make budget with your two combinations.
When you combine them together, we're going to make budget.
You're
and
gonna make
exceed
up
it.
253, right, as it stands?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's, again, that's just my projection. It's simple percentages. I was tried to be conservative, and nothing says it's got to end this way. But if current trends continue, I think this is what we'll do.
And we really didn't have season this year till June the 10th or 15th. What was the day, was it? What day was it on?
Do you remember, Brian, what day it was?
May the 29th.
Yeah, it was Memorial Day
That's when we
weekend.
started.
We
It
opened
was
up.
after, the week after.
We were closed Memorial Weekend.
Right.
Weekend
We weren't
after.
open for Memorial.
No.
Huh?
We weren't open for Memorial
No.
Day this
That's
year.
the week after Memorial Day
Right,
when we
so
started.
you're,
And that was at 25% and 50, and then we
Yeah.
were back to 100%.
Because we were following the governor's orders by then.
when was 100% of that? That was in June, wasn't it?
June 12th, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I thought, it was June.
12th.
We weren't full tilt till June 12th.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
It-
full month.
If you like the bar graph, there it is as a bar graph. You see the little short, stubby green things all the way to the right? That was April, May, and June of last year. Those were some bad months. And the taller green ones next to them are my projections for this year. And that's meals, and this is transient occupancy. Again, just a different representation. But in any event, I think for those two taxes, we should be okay when you combine them. Still, and I'll go ahead and back out of all of this now and go back to our spreadsheet, our budget sheet. Still trying to be conservative. I have not changed our meals tax number yet. But we could gain some revenue. The easy thing to do, balance the budget, is just increase your revenues. That's the easy thing, the easy way out. Me, I'd like to make the best projection I can and then try to hold expenses down. Expenses are controllable, revenues not so much.
So when do we have to present this? What is our time frame again?
Well, the code saying, I've just reviewed that again, as long as you do it by June 30th, you're good to go, as long as you adopt it by then. But it has to be advertised, it has to be voted on, then advertised in the paper, then it has to sit for 7 days, then you have to have a public hearing, and I believe it has to sit again before you can vote, and then you vote to approve it. So there is a process. It takes, from the time you approve this, take a good 30 days to get it done once you've decided on the numbers. I would like to see it done by the 1st of May. All done, ready to go. So we have plenty of room.
If memory serves me right, I think we had budget workshops, that the entire council, we had special budget workshops, so we would all, when we were able to, meet in there and go over the whole budget at one time, so that council was in the know.
We can certainly do that.
We
We
did.
have to have it in this room.
Yeah.
I didn't do that, and I'll do whatever you all are happy with. I didn't do that because I thought there were so many meetings, we could
Right.
get it done this way without having to
Well,
schedule additional
this
meetings.
is a good way to do it, but for the entirety of council, I think having a couple workshops, budget workshops, before it comes out to the public would be a good thing.
Okay?
Just an entirety of the
Okay.
budget.
We did do that. That gave us time to chew on it and come back with questions and things like that. And then when it came time to sit down and vote on it, we were all pretty much on the same
Same
page.
Sure. All right, well, the rest of what we have to do tonight then is, I'll just keep reviewing it. We're out of, like I said, we're over $300,000 out of balance right now in general government. A good part of that is the $200,000 that I took off of meals tax revenues. If we put that back, it'll be very easy to get to a balanced number after you put that back. Or if we put that back, that's not the only place where I removed some revenues. There are other places. A big one I will say is interest income. Last year, or this year, fiscal year that we were in, we had budgeted, or Mr. West had budgeted $80,000 in interest income, which was perfectly reasonable at the time because the actual numbers for the years prior to that bore that out. Right now, we have seen decreases in interest by several 100% in some cases. And not to mention, we've reduced principal by, well, we bought a firehouse, so our principal has come down a little bit. So as you can see, we've kind of squeezed that number down considerably. Right now, out of $80,000 in budgeted interest income, we've collected not quite $7,000, and we're 2/3 of the way through the year. So there are other numbers here that, besides meals tax, that affect this.
Well, also in your TOT, trying to opt your TOT, you're at 1.2 and you're projected 1.4, right?
That's what I'm projecting this year, correct? And I hope I'm right. Again, being a little conservative here.
I got one other question for you. On that water bond, are you putting anything back away into a savings on that? do you put anything back in even though
You
we
mean
stopped
once we
paying?
satisfy the bond?
Once we satisfy the bond?
We hope, yes, we hope to. And one of the things Kelly and I are doing right now is reviewing our new financial policies to make sure we follow those. But yes, we need to, we need not only to put some money away, but I think we're going to do, or there is money in this budget to do a rate study for water next year, in the next fiscal year, so we can hopefully make sure that we are appropriately charging for water. That is not, it's a very basic utility, a very basic commodity. It's not something that we need to be on the backside of the power curve here, looking and wishing we had put money away. We need to stay on it. Now, you'll notice if you look at that last sheet again that the budget for water has a surplus of about $130,000.
We're showing here 240, but am I looking at the wrong?
Well, if we go to the last sheet here.
Total water fund, negative 240.
If you look at the summary sheet, the one I've got on the board there.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at the expenditures, I got you, right. Oh, yeah, I see, I don't have the total, so you're looking at 139 or whatever.
About $139,000.
139 on the
In
difference.
surplus, and we certainly, that, as I said, that needs to be an enterprise account. We need to use the income to reinvest in the account, and it needs to pay for itself. And if we have that surplus, we certainly want to dedicate some of that surplus and put it back into our water reserves. Part of the plan this year, and it's in this budget also, is to paint the ground storage tank, which wasn't done when they painted the elevated tank last year. We've got a good price on it. The same contractor gave us a good number for remobilization, and I think it was in a future budget for $80,000. We're going to be able to get it done for about $44,000. So. Some of the other highlights. Everybody here is familiar with the playground. We're going to get playground donations to the tune of about $150,000 for the playground equipment. We are seeing a decrease in communications taxes. We expect a slight decrease in utilities tax based on the trends. I'm not forecasting any decrease in our bank franchise tax. That's based purely on deposits, and we hope they're going to be stable. You will see the big change in revenues is that there's $425,000 for Sarbanes that was in there this year that's not going to be in for the FY22 budget. Likewise, we reduced expenses by $425,000. So that's basically a flow through there. And we'll be transferring $140,000 from the playground equipment account as per the council's directions, and be transferring $136,000 from the beach and tourism fund, and all that is dedicated to Brianna's Kindness Park. Moving down to the harbor, the big decrease there is the expected decrease in fuel revenues for about $56,000 over this year's budget. Did take a look and bumped his projection up. I had it much lower than that, but took a look at how we're doing this year, and the current trends support raising that revenue, so I bumped it up from 280 to 320 this morning, which I think is still conservative, hopefully still conservative. Trolley is a zero account for us. We don't expect any anything significant going on there. And as I said, the water account is still showing about $139,000 in surplus right now. However, I did reduce water rents by $105,000, and I took a harder look at that this morning. I still think that's warranted right now. I know you'll remember that Harvey told you in a couple meetings ago that our water usage continues to drop for many reasons. I mean, the money that was invested in smart meters a few years ago is starting to pay dividends. You can't use a drop of water that Kelly doesn't know about. I mean, if there's a leak somewhere, it pops up on an alert. They're fixed much more quickly. So yes, water usage is becoming more efficient. Let's say that. We're taking care of the excesses. As a result, your income is going to reduce slightly, and it's going to continue to decline. Another reason that we'd like to see a rate study done in the water department so that we can make sure that we are charging an appropriate amount for the water service. You'll also remember, I think I reported to you many months ago that when the survey, this year's Virginia survey came out, we have some of the lowest water rates of any municipality in the state. We're definitely in the bottom 10%, maybe even lower than that. So while we certainly don't want to be charging more for our services than is appropriate, we certainly need to be charging enough to maintain the system and maintain the service. Looking at general government, big changes there. Of course, the town office staff, we know we're saving about $45,000. We eliminated the position. That drops our Social Security, hospitalization, retirement, VRS. It drops all of that slightly. Operational expenses, we do expect to see a slight increase in insurance. Last year, it was budgeted, this is our umbrella policy, was budgeted at $150,000. We received a $10,000 increase from Versa in May. And we ended up paying about $160,000 for that policy last year. So I am hoping that we can do some things that Versa offers to reduce that down and take part of that $10,000 back out, but we don't have it yet. As discussed previously, I've bumped the office equipment software maintenance number up. That covers most of the licenses for most of our software. I did increase that by about $3,800 this year for the Municode service. That also will codify all of our ordinances, as well as provide a agenda service for all our meetings.
That retirement, I guess you don't know if they're going to require a true-up. They don't give you any inclination on that. Because I look back there, 16, 17, they must have been true-ups, and then we're down to, you've got 44 allocated for 22. Do you know what I mean? Are you following me with this?
Which sheet are you on?
I'm on the general government benefits retirement.
Right, okay.
Because it's been decreasing. You bumped it up a little bit this year to 44.
Well, we got if you remember last year, or not long after I got here, within days actually, I was presented with a letter from VRS bumping the retirement up by 2.37%, which I think last year, I go on a limb and say I think it was about $40,000 that it increased our budget last year. Well, it wasn't budgeted. The budget had been approved by the time we got the increase. So we've been paying that this entire year, unbudgeted. And this year, this budget catches up with that 2.37%, and that's why you're seeing the big.
That's why you see the sway. I got
That's
you.
why
It's
you're
not
seeing
really
the big
a true
increase.
up. I mean, you knew that. They told you what it was.
They
gonna
told
be.
us, and they told us that's good for 2 years, so it's good for
Oh,
this
that's what
year.
I was looking for. So we know that we're.
We know
looking
it's FY21 and FY22, and then FY23 we could very well get another
You
increase.
can get another bump,
Yes,
depending on what the market's doing.
exactly.
Yeah. All
But
right.
they did tell us that was good for 2 years. As you can see, most of the items we're trying very hard to hold the line on or reduce them. Going down to capital improvements, not much there. I mean, Harvey and I are working on a capital improvement plan, which I hope to present to you before the end of this year. A formal capital improvement plan which will list projects, prices, justifications, alternatives, and everything. A true plan so that we can begin to budget for that plan. And then what I'd like to do is, of course, the object for this plan is to try to schedule the projects in such a way that the money that you expend for capital projects is nearly the same amount on an annual basis. You don't want to spend $10,000 this year and $500,000 next year. You want to try to even that money out so that it presents itself as an even amount in the budget.
How'd you come up with 26,000 on the reserve? Property acquisition reserve?
I simply carried over last year's.
Oh, is that what it was last year? Was 26?
Yeah, that was last year's, yes.
I got you. Which evidently got knocked off somewhere along the line.
Yes. I try to put, and you can't see it on the paper, but if you look on the screen, I try to put notes to remind myself it is a large budget, and this one tells me that it was a commitment to save money in last year's budget.
Okay.
That's the reason it was installed. EMS, moving on to EMS, we all know that the fire department wanted to see greater coverage. Mr. Rush came up with a good plan. We implemented that plan. We did see an increase at the end of the year, which we think is still on track for the amount of money that was proposed. We're still seeing, if you look at the EMS budget, and by the way, all these numbers again in column E there are actual as of this morning. So it's everything that was posted through the end of the day yesterday. But if you'll look, there's the EMS budget is still just over 50%, and it's all payroll. It's just over 50% of what it was budgeted for this year. And we are 2/3 of the way through the fiscal year, a good 2/3. So we are saving, doing a good job of saving money in EMS this year. Overtime, the same thing. Brian's doing a good job of holding down the cost in every way that we can. The same rules apply to hospitalization and retirement there. I think we mentioned this number, 97. If you look at FY21 budget under hospitalization, you'll see $97,000. I know for a fact that's a wrong number. There's no way that number could be correct, but it was what was approved in the budget last year, so that's why it's still there. I can't change that without changing what was voted on last year. This year's number, though, if you can see, is only $68,688. So there's no other explanation in that. That's a typo. Again, retirement is more because of the increase, the significant increase that affected us for this fiscal year. And again, EMS is it's basically payroll. The operational expenses are less than $20,000 so far for this year. There are a total of $49,000 in next year's budget, which is, for the amount of people there, is a very small amount of money. And no capital improvements.
Aren't you still a little bit high on your total salaries based on the, or did you extrapolate? I guess that's confusing because it changed January 1st, right? Or February 1st.
What changed?
Aren't your salary still a little bit overestimated there? If you're at 429 on 3.9, how many months have we been in the additional, Brian? Was it 2 months in the additional?
We had it approved in December, but we haven't really started until February, and we actually got the additional staff on.
So we just started.
This is actually our first month. March is our first
gotcha.
month of running the entire program.
So that 846, that's with the whole new
Yes.
part-times,
Yes, that's everything starting July 1st of this year when,
assuming the same labor you've got
Yes.
going from here to the end of the year.
Nothing, no change,
I
same
gotcha.
labor, same plan.
and for reasons that we stated it during the council meeting last week, for various reasons, Brian was able to hold the payroll down to that low number so far this year. We've had some workman's comp issues and some people leave without pay and that sort of thing. Not something you can count on, but something you certainly take advantage of.
I still have to go back and ask, I don't understand why the VOSAP for the volunteer firefighters are in the town's EMS budget. Shouldn't that be somewhere else?
It, if I remember correctly, Councilwoman Belvin, it was, put there simply because it's an expenditure of the town. That was approved years ago, and they decided to put it into this department since it's so closely related. It would come out of another department, whether it be general government or anything. That's why initially that it was put there.
And I'm going to tell you that every once in a while we find something like that where we're not just sure where to put it, so this looks like a good spot.
What is VOSAP?
Retirement.
Did you know what the acronym stands for, Brian?
It's, I don't know the exact acronym, but it's the VRS retirement for the volunteer firefighters.
Oh, okay.
They all have a retirement program that the town and the fire company puts money into each and every year. So after a certain amount of years, they can actually draw from that retirement account. A small amount, but
I figure we might get $60 a month.
McDonald's money.
Yeah.
I wonder how the town got involved in that deal. Something happened years ago, didn't it?
it's been many years,
Yeah.
many years.
That's a strange, yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Public Works. If you look at salaries, immediately that's $32,000 in excess of last year's budget. That is merely the one additional employee we have that we didn't have or we're not going to have this year, but we still have. We've also just had a recent retirement in Public Works. And I have not quite decided yet when to replace that individual. We are making some other arrangements to cover the work. One idea that we've had is, and that's Harvey and myself, is that we may use some, recognizing the fact that we're busier in the summer and we need more people in the summer than we do in the winter, is maybe to use some part-timers in the summer and keep our full-time staff a little light so that in the winter our staff is more appropriately sized. That's an option. We haven't made a decision on that yet. Oops, too fast. Sitting down, you see the same issue with retirement. It's a bump in it's a bump in an extra salary that we didn't that wasn't in last year's budget, as well as the 2.37% increase. Again, not much there in the way of changes. When you go down to capital improvements, you do see the $425,000 in Sarbanes was taken out of expenditures. So that number is reflected in this part of the budget. We do have money in there to resurface the tennis and basketball courts at Memorial Park. And the number here of $30,000 reflects the money that the Tennis Association, or the donation that the Tennis Association said that they would chip in towards this project. It actually totals about $40,000. The equipment for Brianna's Park is there, and the balance of the improvements is lower down here and near the bottom for $235,000. That's the balance of the improvements at Brianna's Park. And when you look at the difference in last year's budget, this budget is under by $75,000 by the time you total it all up, under last year's budget.
Are we still talking about you got it in here, the septic system up at the chamber for the bathrooms? Wasn't there some issue with, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there some issue with being able to put bathrooms there?
Well, yeah, I think we ought to take that out, because we don't have the money in there for the bathroom upgrades, you know what I mean?
We can certainly do that. It takes about,
I mean, the
Watch
system,
this.
for what they're doing now functions well,
it's out.
because we don't have the money for the exterior bathrooms and so
That
forth.
should,
But wasn't there an issue though about putting bathrooms?
well, the
there
issue
or
is that
something?
any building we construct there would, if we construct it below the base flood elevation, would have to be flood-proofed. If it's a commercial building, it's allowed to be flood-proofed, which adds a little bit of cost to it. It's not as ornery as it used to be, or onerous, I should say. But it does add a little bit to the cost.
And that paved Memorial Park Drive and lots, I mean, is that?
That
something we
is,
want?
I would put that in the category as I did back in May and say that's deferrable.
Deferrable, okay. Keep it on there, but keep it deferrable to
Yep.
an extent. What we had mentioned in that one committee meeting about possibly really looking at working on the ramp there and trail parking and so
Yeah.
forth.
It's parking lot. Last time I drove through there, Memorial Park seemed kind of beat up in some places.
Well, it's, I would classify the condition as not an emergency, but if we did it now, it would be proactive.
Yeah.
I've seen much worse parts.
It gets a lot of salt water staying in there.
Yes.
Tides.
Mosquito control, again, not much there. We are going to, this budget does reflect the fact that we are going to bump up our part-time truck drivers' pay a little in order to retain them. You do have to have a license in order to drive a mosquito spray truck. You have to have a spray applicator's license. Not everybody has them. We're fortunate enough to know some people that do have them and are willing to work for us. So we're going to put a few dollars an hour in there for that to retain those individuals. That is a service that we cannot do without.
No. $444 difference. I love it.
Again, not much there, and we're pretty much in balance here. Looking at roads, we did get a slight increase in the urban maintenance grant this year from the state. That's reflected in the revenues that you'll see back under roads. But I believe it was about $14,000 more they gave us this year. We're hoping, we have applied. We've put all the roads in Ocean Breeze in the pot and asked VDOT to approve them. We hope to hear by the summer if those roads have been approved or not, and if they are, we plan to do the extension of Church Street, or I'm sorry, the extension of Ridge Road immediately, because that obviously gets the most traffic. Right now, Harvey and his crew are doing the best job they can to try to keep those holes filled up and that place drivable. You see the same salary figures and increases in salary figures. Again, not much of an increase when you take a look at everything, a little over $11,000. Police, as we were talking about before, we put back the promotions that were budgeted for last year as well as the SRO. Chief Fisher came in today with Captain Greenlee, and they are looking into a grant for the SRO, which will pay a good portion of it. You want to tell us about it, Rob?
From what it looks like, the state every year has been given grant say for SRO officers. So last year, my first year, of course, they're usually due in March, so I missed that. So I kept an eye this year, wasn't sure with COVID, how it was going, but they did, a couple weeks ago, announce that they had money in the budget this year together. It'll pay up to $70,000. Now, that's not just salary, that's the total benefits and everything, salary, benefits and everything. We've been working in what we were talking with Mr. Calder about today. If you really sit down and crunch the numbers, that $70,000 doesn't come out to a whole lot per hour, you know, with our benefits and stuff. So it is gonna be a help if it takes $70,000 total off, you know, of what we're looking at, you know, towards our SRO. And it's no guarantees, the grant says it, no guarantees, but it can be for up to 4 years. As long as the General Assembly funds those grants and we're doing everything we're supposed to do, making our, you know, reports on time, then it can be good for up to 4 years. And I believe after that 4 years, the way all the other grants have worked, to my knowledge, for SROs, you know, the town just has to agree that they will take that position over. You know, we can't just hire a person after 4 years, you know, when the grant comes out. So right now, we do have an in-kind match, and Tyler has done some checking into that, and we're thinking, because the SRO is gonna have to have a vehicle, so from the way it looks, we're thinking that we can use the money from the vehicle to come up with our in-kind match. So, we're keeping our fingers crossed right now that everything's gonna work out like it should, and, you know, hopefully we'll get this, and like I said, that will even, you know, knock the $70,000, hopefully off of our, salaries, you know, for the next 4 years, maybe. Hopefully, that's what we're shooting for. That'll be good.
The big jump in the office supplies and equipment, was that due to that software upgrade that, went from?
I believe,
Yes.
I believe what we had talked about, Chief Fisher, was there was some office furniture that needed replacing in the station.
You know, that wouldn't have been that big, that's just a couple chairs. Office supplies and equipment.
Mm-hmm. Went up to 10. You got proposed for 10 grand.
I'll have to look at my notes and see what exactly that was. But I met with each department head and we reviewed the entire budget for each department, and I kept notes, so we'll have to take a look and see exactly what that was. I should have had a note on here that told me, but I didn't put it there, it looks like.
I thought maybe it was for the dispatch software equipment.
No, that will be under
That's-
dispatch, which we'll hit next. That's accounted for under the dispatch tab.
Ah, different one.
School resource officer, I mean, I still like to see the county chipping in on that.
We will be talking to the county about that.
And then, you know, and if we do it, does that shed the liability on us now for what happens up there? Where it's, I mean, it's county school, county property. We're providing the resource officer. Are we all right legally with all that? This doesn't shed liability on us more than we should be taking, or do we need a
We asked for
MAU?
all there anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, if we provide a school resource and we're assuming that liability over the county, I would assume. I don't know, I'd like a kind of some kind of determinant on that. If, you know, do we need a memorandum of understanding or something with
Well,
the
we got a
county?
memorandum of understanding with the sheriff's office, and we do have, that's one of the requirements of the grant, if we do have to, we don't have to have it before the grant, but we have to have it by the time the grant is approved, you know, and distributed to us. Yeah, we do have to have a memorandum of understanding also with the county.
With the
for
school
public
board.
school.
Yeah, that would be my concern.
I was involved in writing the one for the school system. They just finished it, what, a few months ago, wasn't it, Rob?
Yes, yes, sir.
But it was quite a negotiation.
That's what I mean, because I was saying there, you're shifting liability a little bit.
Mhm.
I mean,
But yeah,
there is an occurrence there, a person that's been found negligent, you're shifting it to us over top the
Well,
county.
basically, I mean, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but basically, we're gonna get the call if something happens there anyway. So we're gonna be responding. If we, you know, God forbid, but if there was an active shooter there, we're gonna be responding. We're not gonna wait for the sheriff's office to get there.
Oh, no, I understand the response.
So, I
I'm
mean,
talking about the
to
overall
me,
care.
The liability is gonna be the same, because we're gonna be responding there for whatever happens anyway. We're not just gonna sit back and let the sheriff's office say, oh, that's, you know, sheriff's or Accomack County property, so we're gonna, you know, I mean, we're gonna be the ones there, no matter what happens, if it's an SRO there, or if it's.
Right,
or
but-
if
right.
we're on the
Oh.
street.
But the general safety and well-being of the children in the school, that's county responsibility right now. We don't want to shift that responsibility to us.
Even though, right now, there are none.
Right, even though there are none, but it's still a county responsibility.
I will check with our insurer to find out if there's any, if they require any additional hoops to jump through, or if they charge additional funds for us having SRO. I would think that it would be covered under our normal, they know we have a police department. I would
Right.
think that it would be covered under that, but I'll definitely check with them to make sure they have no issue with an SRO.
And that's probably all covered in that. You do a memorandum
I think it
for
would,
this grant.
to me, it's no different than that man right there going up there with an ambulance instead of waiting for a county ambulance to come over to county property. I would think that somewhere in everything that's probably already been established as to, but I get what you're saying, Chris. I do get that. We won't be covered wholly, but.
We just won't be covered.
Sure.
I think that, I would think that'd be a pretty simple fix if it isn't already fixed.
Well,
Just need to look into it, is all I'm saying.
sure. And as Robbie was telling me this morning, the SRO is required to go to a 1 week of school just
Of
for
course, I know
SROs.
I know that they were going to 1 week every summer,
Yeah.
like an in-service. I'm not 100% sure yet on the SRO school itself, if it is just that 1 week, or if they have to go to 2 or 3 week school or whatever, but I'm gonna check on that also.
Okay.
No, that's good, that's all I had.
Thank you.
You can see there's a few other increases there. Really, the largest ones that we've already talked about, and we are a bump of $53,000 this year in police as the budget stands now. Moving on to dispatch, that's a fairly short one. It is mainly, again, salaries. And we're $24,000 over last year's budget in dispatch. $12,000 of that is the new dispatch service agreement for the equipment that we pay $1,000 a month, which we hope comes online in the next few weeks. Moving on to water, a bright spot. Again, I reduced the water rents by $100,000. Taking a look, retirement again is in excess of last year by about 11 grand. Everything else, we've tried to hold the line on it.
What's that VFD? Is that
A VFD is a variable frequency drive. It's
Oh,
a
that's right, you talked about
controller you put on a motor to make it run at different speeds based on the demand for that service that motor's providing.
Yeah, I forgot you talked about that.
The big thing here is we will satisfy our water bond, or one of the water bonds that we have this year in May. We'll make the last payment in May. That's a $177,000 increase to on the revenue side there, or I should say decrease on the expense side, which accounts for all of the surplus that we have in that department. We'd certainly like to put a good part of that money away and dedicate it to our water reserves. A couple of other bright spots. We needed a new gateway, which is basically an antenna for the smart meters, because we aren't getting the extreme ends of the island. We still aren't getting coverage. So Harvey's found a way to. It was budgeted this year at $65,000. Harvey's found a way that we can do it for about $25,000. It involves an 80-foot timber pole and a whip antenna, which he'll install down on the south end of the island, probably at the harbor. So that'll speed things along and give us better coverage there. And at some point, we may put one on the north end of the island, but right now, we're just going to maintain what we have there. Again, the groundwater storage tank for $44,000. It was budgeted this year at $80,000. And replace, replace one of the high lift pumps and install a VFD on that pump. And we will probably be installing VFDs on these pumps as we replace them now. It makes sense. It not only gives you better service, but it cuts way down on the electricity. And if you buy the right pump to go with the VFD, it extends the life of the pump, so it's a win-win all the way around. And you can see for the difference in last year's budget, almost $250,000 there.
Amazing.
At the harbor, again, we reduced the fuel revenue slightly, just being conservative. You can see that we're about $80,000 under what was budgeted, I'm sorry. That number did not follow through. And I don't know why. I changed it in one sheet and it didn't pop through to the other one. I will correct that. I don't know why that didn't take place. But we anticipate fuel purchases of about $250,000. I do need to bump that number up because I did bump revenue up, and I did not bump the expense up for that. So I'll bump that up a little as well. I can't do it right this second, but we will do that. Again, floating dock and finger pier, we're expecting about another $14,000 there. And we expect about a change of about $20,000 overall in harbor rents this year. That is something else that we've been looking at in the last several days, is whether our harbor rents are appropriate for, low. There you go. Let's just say it.
Low.
They're low. As we make improvements, which we certainly have been doing, and certainly with the long waiting list that we have, it could justify an increase in harbor rents. Again, being an enterprise account, money should stay in the harbor and be dedicated to reserves for things for the harbor. Trolley, again, is pretty much going to be zeroed out. And here we are back to our summary page. And after the one change I made, we still have a deficit of $371,000 in the general fund. So the way I see us moving forward on that or correcting that is, let me blow that up so you can see it a little easier. The way I see us taking care of that is to make some educated assumptions with revenues, and then maybe deferring a couple things on the expense side to bring that in balance. And that really, once that's in balance, I think we can handle the $964 at the harbor that we're out of balance. We'll have Vernon stay there and sell hot dogs or something till we make up that. So I am not concerned that we can't balance this in short order, and I will schedule. I'll send an email and test the waters and see when everybody would like to meet. But we'll go ahead and schedule a couple of budget workshops if it takes that, and sit down in this room and just drag it all out and go through it and start moving numbers around until we get it in balance. I can also probably have. I'm sure Brian and Robbie won't mind attending, and I'll get Kelly here too, so that if there's anything in the accounting side of it, she can answer it. So we'll have all the answers in the room, and we'll make good use of our time.
So you all good with that, Denise, and all of you
Yes.
good with that?
Yes.
So we'll send it back to you so we get and bring it before the whole council at a budget workshop type meeting. So we're done with it in this committee,
Okay.
unless the council sends it back to us. And we can hash it out. All right, moving on. Committee member comments and discussion. Author, start with you.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Denise,
No, sir.
I don't have anything either. No. Anything else? Motion?
So
Motion
moved.
to adjourn. Second.
Done.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.